transition into, as we move into some wines that are from slightly maybe cooler spots, we're going to transition through with Vine Hill Ranch, which is owned by Bruce and Heather Phillips. And Bruce is on the panel today to represent the estate. But, a lot of it's funny because our Sonoma panel this morning was a lot of women, and the Napa panel is a little bit mixed. But almost when the estates are family owned, there's one person on the panel, but there are often other people behind the scenes who we'd love to have on the panel, but we can't have. So that sort of explains the makeup sometimes of these panels. But anyway, I'm talking too much. Bruce, thanks for being here. Tell us about Vine Hill Ranch. We're at the southern end of Oakville here, approaching Yountville, right on the border. And what do we need to know?
Is this on? Yeah. I could happily sit down and Heather could come up here. Like, I get the message. But,
it's not directed towards you. It's just sometimes I'm asked, like, why are, I'm just asked sometimes, and I think it's important to preface that, especially when it comes to family domains, there's usually multiple people involved that could be spouses or.
No, it's very true, yeah. And thank you. First of all, it's a tremendous honor to be here. I'm a little different than I think everybody else on this panel in that my family, we're primarily wine grape growers. And we have been, my family's about to cross our 70th season at Vine Hill Ranch. And a number of people have been very influential in terms of bringing forward meaningful wines from my vineyard that have helped us along this long journey to ultimately release our own wine that celebrates our family's vineyard. So I've really been inspired by the gentleman that came before me in terms of how do I describe Vine Hill Ranch. Vine Hill Ranch rises from the valley floor and largely the benchlands to the tops of the Mayacamas Range on the furthest southwest reach of what is today known as the Oakville appellation. What makes Vine Hill Ranch remarkable is its very varied nature. It has undulation that moves through the hillsides. At its lower elevations, it's uniformly deep gravel loam alluvial soils. As you ride up the hillside slopes, well, gravity is always working against that loamy content, and in turn, your soil profiles get thinner as you get higher. So in turn, vines are struggling in a different way at the higher elevations. We're bounded by two water courses, Hopper Creek, which represents the southern bound of the Oakville appellation to our south, and an unnamed creek to our north. And if you think about water courses, as they come off the steeper Mayacamas slope, well, they begin to lose momentum. And as they lose momentum, they start to meander over time. And in their wake, they leave mineral content or river rock, sort of 6-8-inch polished rocks that if you look at our bordering blocks, our blocks 2 and block 7, you pass through a mineral strain in those blocks. Sort of a unique characteristic. But probably the most singular aspect to this site, we were talking about the Bacchus Vineyard, considerable on the western slope, considerable volcanic content. And at Vine Hill Ranch, there are 3 formations that dance through the midsection of this vineyard that were, back when volcanic activity was departing the region, were areas where magma was just sort of seeping up, and then it fell quiet. And if you dig down on the caps of these formations, maybe 4 to 6 feet, you hit these huge chalk white formations, and you can't move them. All right, they're loaded with a mineral called rhyolite, and we're farming on the eroded content of those formations. So it's volcanic. So think about maybe the ashes in your fireplace. They drain really fast, and there's not a lot of nutritional value in those areas. So vines are struggling in very distinct ways. I'm going to shift gears here for a moment. I think a lot about wine and wine grape growing. And one of the things that I've started to sort of center around is the notion that every vintage represents generations of effort to bring forward that particular vintage. People talk about the notion of vintage and they largely are focused on climate. What weather happened that year? But in fact, in any given growing season, any given vine is touched upwards of 15 to 20 times to bring forward that crop before it even gets to cellar. Each of those moments represent a distinct decision in terms of how you're going to bring forward that vine's crop for that year. Ultimately, it gets to cellar, and then there's innumerable touch points to bring forward that wine to glass. But even before that, and in my family's case, I'm third generation on this site. My grandfather brought us to this vineyard in 1956. My mother and father brought forward a world-class Cabernet vineyard. Before that, we were largely commodity wine grape growers. Growers would never have been invited to this table in that moment. But my father made some very astute decisions in terms of dedicating this site to Cabernet Sauvignon. This is uniquely a Cabernet site. But more importantly, identifying a body of different sites, 18 in total across this 70-acre vineyard, that warranted being brought forward slightly differently on a single variety in Cabernet. Now, the tools that growers use to do that, not to rant on, do I still have time?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Here are the
Get the beat.
tools. You've got clones, you've got rootstocks, you've got row direction, you've got canopy architectures, you've got planting densities, how closely you're going to plant these vineyards. These are the tools that growers use to optimize expression. In the mid-'80s, my father brought forward a great vineyard. And today, and earlier this century, we brought forward our first crush around VHR. At the time, we talked about producing a grower's wine. This wine is meant to celebrate the site. We source from all 18 subblocks across this site to make a wine of unique and singular complexity from this vineyard, Vine Hill Ranch. And it's meant to celebrate the vintage and the growing season from within which it was grown. Each of these wines are representative of their site and the particular vintage of 21. So I'm very proud to be here, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bruce. So we've just tasted 5 world-class Napa Valley Cabernets from an